Based on his theory of biological tides, Dr. Lieber suspected that January 1974 should be a period of extreme danger. He issued a warning to authorities.
We're having an interesting coincidence of cosmic cycles coming up in about 2 weeks. There's going to be a full moon, a lunar perigee, and an eclipse. And this would be one of the times that we would predict an increase in the murder frequency and also in the qualitative nature, the bizarre type of sex-related murders that we've been having in the other 2 times that we pegged this.
The first week in January, arson went on the upswing. Several cities reported a strange wave of fires and accidents. Emergency rooms were jammed, far beyond the usual Saturday night syndrome. By day, a mood of tension seemed to hang over the cities. The weather was hot and still. Reports began to come in from around the country. Orlando, 2 police patrolmen were slain on duty. Police switchboards reported an unusual number of calls. Then came the time of full moon. For police on patrol, it was a night to remember. A 45-year-old man stabbed his 25-year-old son to death after an argument over a car. Wichita, Kansas, 4 members of a family were shot in their home. Jackson Memorial Hospital, a medical resident was bound, beaten, and strangled. In Miami alone, the murder rate jumped to 3 times normal. A 57-year-old drifter was beaten with a board, and his throat was slashed. No apparent motive. For 3 weeks, violent outbreaks continued across the nation. This was more than enough proof for Dr. Lieber. He considered his theory valid. Certain extreme tides occur once every 2,000 years. The next is due in December 1990. Is there any defense against the madness that may strike again? Twice a day, the ocean rises and falls about 4 feet, pulled by the gravitational force of the moon. Many scientists think that life began down in the depths of the sea. Ancestors of these creatures were lured to the shore and stranded there at low tide. Most died. A handful evolved into amphibians, into animals, ultimately into us. Is it possible we can feel that time 1 billion years ago when we moved from the water up to the land and the air? Our bodies are still 75% water, the same salt water. If the vast ocean could be pulled toward the beckoning moon, could we also be at the mercy of her gravity? This theory of biotides has been received with skepticism by many scientists. Chief amongst them, George Abel, professor of astronomy at UCLA.
The moon is the Earth's nearest astronomical neighbor. Its distance is only 30 times its own diameter. And it's because the moon is so near that it can have an important effect on producing tides. The moon pulls on the side of the Earth nearest it more strongly than it pulls on the side away from the moon, and that tries to stretch the Earth a bit into a football shape. The Earth actually distorts about 8 inches. But I emphasize that tides are only important because they're acting over the entire 8,000-mile diameter of the Earth. It depends on the distance over which they act. A 6-foot man is nothing in comparison. The moon can lower a man's weight by at most 1/100th of a gram, like a mosquito on his shoulder. And the effect of tides on the fluids of a person's body are 30 trillion times less than the weight of those same fluids. It's absolutely impossible that the biological tides can have any effect on human beings. Indeed, the tidal force exerted on me by this globe of the Earth is thousands of times stronger than the tides exerted on me by the moon.
If tidal forces are too weak to influence human behavior, why then have we always felt the moon could affect us so strongly? For thousands of years, ancient peoples tried to solve that mystery. Many temples have been found to be computers in stone, designed to predict lunar phases and eclipses. Is it possible we remember a time when the moon may have triggered another step in evolution, the emergence of the first humans? In small family groups, they roamed the veldt, eking out a bare existence. It was a night of full moon, and they felt an instinct to take to the hunt. That moment is recreated here. They had moved down from the trees. They had given up grubbing for roots and were beginning to hunt other animals, rich in protein. With a hungry family waiting, the hunter knew this was no game. It was life or death. When the moon was full, he could see to track the skittish prey. In a way, at a crucial time in our past, we did turn into wolves. The women who waited found that they too seemed linked to the moon. While the men hunted, they closely watched the night sky to time their own fertility. They seemed to become fertile every 29 days, with the full moon. Legends grew that women were made pregnant not by men, but by the moon. In modern obstetrics wards, an old belief is shared by many women, the belief that more babies are born at full moon. Nurse Sherry Shaw.
It's an old wives' tale, and we definitely go along and tell the patients that it's an old wives' tale only. But we really see a big influence. When the moon is full, patients just seem to come in. And it's not only here, it's seen in a lot of wards. Every place that I've worked, it's been the way it is. But it's been handed down through the years, because my great-grandmother was a midwife, and the story has perpetuated through our family, clear back from her.
I have been hearing for years that all kinds of strange things happen at full moon, and one of the things that's supposed to happen, according to legend, is that more babies are born at full moon. Well, this seemed a surprising thing to me, so a colleague of mine, a man at the medical center at UCLA Hospital, Dr. Bennett Greenspan, and I collaborated on the study of some 12,000 live births at the UCLA Hospital over a 51 lunar month period. Now, it would have been very exciting if we'd found some positive effect, but we found absolutely nothing. No effect whatsoever, absolutely random during the lunar cycle. Well, I must say this was quite a surprise to the nurses, because the nurses were all certain we were going to find a very strong positive correlation. I think what happens is that if there's a busy night and the nurses look outside and notice a bright moon, and the moon is bright roughly a third of the time, then they say, aha, full moon, that's why we have all this activity. But if there's not a bright moon, they forget it. It may be a bit like dreams that come true. If a dream does come true, you remember it. But the vast majority of times where it doesn't, you tend to forget.
What then of the flurries of violence and insanity reported at full moon, correlated by statistical studies? Among scientists, widely varying claims have been made.
In any data sample, there are always random fluctuations. For example, if you study homicides against the lunar cycle, you're going to get peaks at certain dates, always. And sometimes they may just happen to occur near full or new moon. But that doesn't mean anything. One has to replicate such a result by many repeated experiments. In the case of Lieber's experiments, he found peaks in one case at full and new moon, or near new moon, but he found slightly different peaks in a different sample and a larger peak at third quarter than at new moon. And other people who have tried to replicate his observations find it impossible to do so. Alex Picorni at Baylor College, Texas, for example, has studied over 7,000 homicides and murders and suicides and finds no correlation whatsoever with phase of the moon or with even the distance of the moon.